Bulavinaka, good afternoon. I'm Vijay Narayan and we are speaking today to the National Federation Party leader, economist and former Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad. Professor Prasad, we know you have turned what is happening now as a national crisis. We've had a significant increase in fuel prices out of our control as the global forces dictate what is happening now. A lot of people already saw this coming, and finally government had to make the decision to increase the fuel prices significantly. What is your message to the people knowing that this is now a national crisis?
So, two messages, Vijay. One is that this is a national crisis, not as a result of any government policy or any action by certain groups or entities or policy. This is a direct consequence of the Iran-Israel-US war, building on to the crisis in Ukraine and earlier war by Israel and the Palestinians. So it's a crisis that was there. The current crisis has taken this to the next level. And what we have now is a global economic crisis. So my message to the people, and especially to the opposition, and to the likes of Honorable Kumar and Honorable Usumate and Honorable Vijay Nath, not to make political point scoring out of this, but to ensure that the people are communicated with facts, with very clear message, with strategies, with suggestions as to how we can deal with this crisis as a country. Because what has happened is already affecting economies around the world. So, second message is that we as individuals, as families, and by and large, Vijay, most people are rational. You know, when we in economics we say people do make rational decisions. And so there would be adjustments that people will make themselves. There will be thinking about how to navigate this crisis. And that's the right thing to do. And most right thinking people would want to hear very clearly what the government intends to do about it, in terms of policy, in terms of supporting vulnerable groups, in terms of communicating with the people, with those strategies, with those policies. And that's where our focus as leaders in parliament, outside of parliament, need to do, so that we don't create panic, we don't confuse people, and we build on what the government, what the country, what the different entities, that matter are able to do. So that's my message.
Professor Prasad, also, we expect the fuel prices to increase even further because the demand is high. There's a lot of issues up in the air still. And even if the war ends tomorrow, the effects of it or the impact of it may take months. What are your comments on that?
Vijay, that's a very important point that you made, and I'm glad you made that point. And you're absolutely right. Even if the war ends tomorrow, the impact of the war that has already, the activities that has already taken place, is going to linger on not just for 6 months, probably for more than a year and beyond. Because what is going to happen is the supply chain has been disrupted. Production processes have been disrupted. Policy changes have taken place. Oil companies are looking at different incentives. Freighters are looking at different incentives. And all those economic entities that are dependent on fuel, businesses, production facilities, all of them would be strategizing, all of them would be implementing policies in anticipation of what is likely to happen. So you are absolutely right. Even if the war ends tomorrow, there will be no reprieve immediately, and it could linger on for 6 months to a year. What will happen globally is this: countries will continue to build reserves. Countries will anticipate future conflicts. So the demand for energy, the demand for fuel will also increase globally. And with the demand, prices will also increase. So even if we remove all the taxes on fuel imports, the 20 cents on diesel, 46 cents on unleaded fuel, make VAT zero, no taxes. Even without that, the fuel prices are going to increase. And that means that we have to ensure that our energy supply, power supply, continues. And for that, we need to put in incentives and strategies to ensure that we continue to get the supply. And the price increase announced by FCCC was inevitable. That was expected, because the fuel companies will also be looking at their own strategies, looking at the cash flow, looking at incentives to ensure that there is supply. If they don't have that, we could actually have a supply problem, and that would be more disastrous. It's better to have the supply with a slightly higher price, and those that are vulnerable, those that would be affected the most, can be supported by targeted programs by the government through various incentives, expenditure policies, support for those on social welfare, support for small businesses. All this will help to address the impact of the increase in fuel prices.
The issue about the 20 cents fuel tax on unleaded or on diesel, and the 46 cents on unleaded. The opposition is pushing hard for the removal of that. Your assessment is that the government could lose close to about $150 million in revenue. Now, the government also needs that fiscal space or that revenue to provide for the most vulnerable. If you were still the Minister for Finance, and we know those discussions are currently taking place, we're trying to find out about urgent relief, what would be your message?
I think my message to the opposition is, it's very simple. It's very easy. Politically, very explosive for them. They can get a little bit of mileage saying, okay, reduce the duty. But Vijay, even if we reduce the duty, the
fuel tax.
Fuel tax of 20 cents on diesel and 46 cents. As you highlighted earlier, the events happening in the Middle East, the supply chains that have been broken already, the production facilities that are being destroyed, all that will have a significant impact on the price rise anyway. So even if we remove the fuel tax, 20 cents, 46 cents today, that doesn't mean that the fuel prices will not increase further. Even with that reduction, it may help for a month. But if the war continues, or even if the war ends, in the second, third month, the price will continue to rise. Supply disruptions may continue for another 6 months. Then what do? You lose that $150 million, which you could use to target, support the most vulnerable, support small, medium enterprises, support public transport, ensure that entities like EFL are supported additionally so that power remains available to all the households, to all the businesses, to all the production entities. The worst thing that can happen in a crisis, Vijay, is when people lose jobs. And during COVID, that happened. People lost jobs that disrupted their income, their livelihoods, not for 6 months, not for 2 months, not for 3 months, but for years. Now, this crisis is slightly different. We have to ensure that fuel supply is available to all our employers, production facilities, households, so that people don't lose jobs. If, say, tomorrow FMF doesn't have fuel to run its factory, or farmers don't have fuel to plow the land, fishermen don't have diesel or petrol to go out fishing, you are disrupting their livelihoods, you're disrupting their source of income. And if people lose jobs, you are disrupting their source of income. So the first priority of the government, and this is what the opposition should be talking about, they should be coming out with some sensible suggestion instead of just taking the easy way out, saying, oh, reduce the taxes, lose the revenue, and forget about those in the social welfare. They're not thinking. And I think good thinking would require that we dissect these impact into different sectors. So the bottom line should be that we should make sure that power is available, energy is available uninterrupted to all the households, to all the production facilities, and for that we need to support EFL. If it needs government support, government subsidies, so be it, because that will help ensure production facilities, that will ensure that income stream flows into households. Then, if we find that after doing that, that our economy is still growing, people are still consuming, people still have jobs, revenue is still coming, and if we feel that the price continues to rise even more, then we should look at whether we want to reduce some of these taxes or VAT or whatever. That should come a bit later. Right now, we should ensure that people's income, household incomes are protected, jobs are protected, and that's where our target ought to be right now.
In terms of clear communication and urgent relief matters, we know there's those who are the most vulnerable will start to get affected already.
Yeah.
How soon should the government act? Because the government needs to prioritize its expenditure now. Things have changed since the budget had come out, and we didn't anticipate the crisis of this level, which is expected to continue, as you said, for about a year now.
So, Vijay, that's again a very good question. And what I want to say is that there will need to be reprioritization of expenditure. So there are provisions within the Financial Management Act, within the existing budget for deployment of funds from one ministry to another. There is environment provisions. So government will have to make sure, for example, we have to quickly assess in the next 1 or 2 weeks how this price, how quickly is going to affect some of the most vulnerable and those on social welfare, for example, those that need direct support, such as farmers, where we can keep the continuity, keep the subsidies, keep incentivizing production. That can be done immediately in terms of expenditure priority. And as I said, some expenditures which have a long-term strategy can be deferred to address some of the more pressing needs right now to address, as you said quite rightly, those vulnerable groups who may be affected immediately. A small price increase or 70 cents increase in diesel cost may lead to increase in the cost of production, cost of fertilizers for farmers. So those immediate support can already be provided out of the budgets that are already there through environment, through deployment. If it needs to move from one ministry to another, there is a provision in the Financial Management Act for deployment. So, and I'm sure the committee that the cabinet has put in place would be looking at all those, and I would encourage them to quickly and immediately look at where are the flash points, where we may need to quickly reprioritize expenditure. And I think Ministry of Finance has the capability, and the people are there who can look at the whole expenditure very quickly and prioritize and direct funding towards.
But they need to act with a sense of urgency, as the Fiji Commerce and Employers Federation has also asked, first of all, to act with urgency, second, clear communication, and thirdly, to ensure that the voices of the private sector is heard during this critical time as well.
I agree. I think clear communication is very important. And clear communication, Vijay, also involves those in the opposition, those critics, because the worst thing you can do in a crisis like this is to send messages that create panic, that create an expectation that things are suddenly going to be that bad, and that people are beginning to panic and not rationally thinking about how they can adjust, how they can navigate themselves. That's very important. The message from government, message from the opposition, and message from different economic entities. And I think Employers Federation has sent a very clear message. They are right in asking for very clear communication on policy, on expenditure prioritization. They are right on saying that there are things that we need to urgently address and policies that we need to put in place. For example, making sure that EFL is in a position that the supply of fuel strategy is already put in place, already working, so that there is no disruption to power supply, because that's critical, because that will save jobs, that will allow continued production, that will allow continued income stream to flow into the households. So there are some urgent things that the government needs to do. And the third, of course, is making sure that the private sector, which is the engine of growth, which creates a large majority of jobs, especially small and medium enterprises, we need to quickly think about a package that we can announce, that we can incentivize, that people's expectation of what happens in the future determines what they do now, because this is how economics operate. If people expect things to be very bad and that there will be no support by the government, then they will start pulling back right now. They will, and that can have an economy-wide impact of things not happening, and that will ultimately affect the people. So I think, as an economist, I know this very well, that we need to send very clear messages. And my message to the business community is this: that the government, I think, has already said, and I would also labor that point, that we must make sure that the energy supply is not disrupted. And there are strategies that we can put in place. For example, we must prioritize public transport. If we have to provide fuel concession to bus operators, let's do that now. Let's tell them now, so that we have more public transport. And if we get to a situation where there is issue about supply, where we have to prioritize support, If people want to park their car in Nasori and travel by bus, then the buses ought to be available. There might be a need for more bus services transporting people to and from work. And so those kind of strategies need to be articulated very quickly. The message has to be very clear, and the assessment ought to be made. My assessment of the global impact of this crisis, Vijay, again, I want to emphasize that I said this earlier, and you said that as well, that even if the war ends tomorrow, there's a ceasefire, Donald Trump decides we're getting out of Iran, Today, this morning, he said in 2 to 3 weeks or whatever. Whatever happens, the disruption has already occurred in the supply, in the transportation, and that will take time to fix. Even after it is fixed, there will be things like countries building their reserves further. So there will be fuel supplies that will be directed towards reserve, which will mean that the demand for energy, demand for fuel will further increase, which would mean increase in prices even more. So I'm not trying to be very pessimistic about what might happen, but this is what the story tells us now, if you look at what's happening there. So keeping that in mind on one side, what we need to do is what I have outlined earlier. The last message I want to give is we are negotiating, and this is my message to Australia, in particular with respect to the security treaty that we are negotiating. I think it is a great opportunity for Fiji and Australia to look at this security strategy, not only strictly in terms of security from the military sense or naval sense or working out, the geopolitical, scenarios, but it is also an opportunity for a broader economic security package. And I would urge us, Fiji and Australia, to work together on this security package, which should also include a large economic package, such as budget support, for the next 2 or 3 years, so that with that commitment, with that strategy, with that deal, we can plan, we can prioritize, we can do a budget, that would be delivered in the next 2 or 3 months, so that our economic package, our economic strategy is on a very good footing. Fortunately, in the last 3 years, the policies that we undertook has put Fiji on a very strong economic footing. The fundamentals are very good. Our reserves are holding very well. Our interest rates are very low. Our inflation rate went down. Our expenditure, our revenue has been good. So what we did in the last 3 years has put the economy in a strong position. What we need, and we did this very well. I mean, the IMF is talking about lack of fiscal space. Yes, it's a very historical fact that this fiscal space for most countries post-COVID is limited. But in the last 3 years, we were able to reduce debt to GDP ratio from 90% to 77%. Honorable Kumar talks about fiscal space. She's running with the IMF statement to say there is little fiscal space. She doesn't know she was a part of a government that actually created that mess. Of course, we had COVID, part of that mess was contributed by COVID. But the mess started even before COVID. They had negative growth in 2019. Our record in the last 3 years, Vijay, is very good. We've had an average growth of more than 3%. We've had an expenditure policy that was expansionary sometimes, but we also had a revenue policy that actually did well. So, if anyone understands, how to steer the economy out of what we got, it's this government, and we did that. But that is not going to help us
Right now.
if we do not strategize, given this crisis, which is an unexpected, much bigger. It could be much more prolonged. As we say sometimes, bad times can last long.
Professor Prasad, for public transport, you said that again the urgent assistance needed. The state of Victoria in Australia, not too far away here, one of our neighbouring countries in Australia, just this week they have made public transportation, trains, trams and buses free for 1 month to cushion the blow on the people. And the Bus Operators Association has already released a statement just a few hours ago calling on the government for relief and urgent assistance. How important is that?
I think that's very important, and I support that. I support the bus operators' call for urgent government support, and I urge the Ministry of Finance to look at concessions to the bus industry so that we are able to incentivize and suggest to people that they ought to use more public transport, that there is more frequency of public transport available. And as I said, people are rational, and there will be a lot of people who will choose public transport as opposed to taking their own private vehicles, where they will be paying more in terms of fuel, etc. So it will be a very rational decision, and a suggestion from the Bus Operators Association is a good one.
Is Fiji in a place to be able to give free bus fare programs?
I think all that is possible, but I think we can start with concession, so that the bus operators have an incentive to provide more services, to run more trips, and if we need to provide free transport at some point, that would be appropriate.
Should be
well.
part of the risk level planning.
Yeah, part of the risk level planning. Yeah.
What about, my final question, and the people are watching from around Fiji and the world, we know that this is not just about fuel prices going up. This is about the cost of living going up. This is about goods and services, the cost going up of all goods and services, and it will affect every family. During COVID, the people were being encouraged to even plant their own vegetables, whatever they could do to make sure that their dollar stretches further. What's your message to the people out there?
My message to the people is very simple. First of all, I want to say that most people are rational, which means that they anticipate, they work out what they're going to do. Government policy ought to support their income. We must make sure, because as I said, even if we provide targeted support, even if there are policies which provide relief, in terms of, even if you reduce VAT, say VAT is 0 on 22 basic items, including medicine. Now, even if the duty is 0, a lot of those items also have 0 duty. So there is no tax, there is no burden from the government on that. But the fuel cost goes up, the freight cost goes up, all the prices of those items will also go up. Now, what do? One strategy is to make sure that government sends direct checks to the people or provides free transport, public transport, or concession to bus companies so that they can continue with the reduced fare, etc. So there are a number of strategies that can be put in. But the most important thing, Vijay, in a crisis like this is that people continue to have their jobs, well-paid jobs. So even if their expenditure is stretched, rational consumers, rational households, rational individuals would start looking at their discretionary expenditure. There will be readjustments. But the important thing for government to ensure is that the income stream doesn't stop. For farmers, we must continue to provide the support. We must continue with the subsidies. For workers, we must ensure that our employers, our factories, our production facilities continue to operate so that all those people who are employed continue to get their income. That's fundamental. And we must protect that at any cost, which would mean that we must protect the supply of energy. We must ensure that households have, not only households have energy, but all the production entities, economic entities have that as well. And for those who are the most vulnerable, as I said, expenditure prioritization would help increase, whether it's to do with the social welfare allowances, whether it's to do with providing additional support for the elderly. These are all expenditure targeted to the most vulnerable, and that can be done within the existing budget through the appropriate deployment and the provisions in the Financial Management Act.
Professor Biman Prasad, thank you very much for speaking to us. And of course, to all our viewers and listeners, we have been reaching out to the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance to discuss the urgent relief measures and what is the government's plan. Stay with us, stay on Fiji Village. We'll have more on our website and